What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to episode 123, 123 of the Lombard Trucking Show. Thank you all once again for being here. Appreciate you guys for tuning in on the last episode. Gabrielle, what a story she has in there, and I've been following her. The owner of the company she's now working for, Tremaine, he just recently got his CDL, and if you follow her on Instagram, she's been training him on backing in at warehouse and stuff. It's really incredible. So definitely follow along with her journey. Going into it, as always, you can listen to the Lombard Trucking Show every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on the iHeartRadio network for REITs across America. And again, we had a great training weekend this weekend, 50-mile half century ride on Saturday, 10-mile run today as we get geared up for the 70.3 Waco Ironman Triathlon this October 6th. And again, to donate, or please go to www.reithsacrossamerica.org/Lombard. And one wreath is $17. But if you work for a motor carrier or a company, I'm not necessarily asking you for the money, but to get this message out there and what we're trying to do with wreaths, with driver health, let them know what we're doing, what Lombard's doing, and how they can play a part in it. Also, got to give a shout out once again, if you're looking to jumpstart your week, get yourself some super coffee. I have it in the morning. I'm going to have one tomorrow morning before I go to Run Club. You can go to Amazon right now, get 20% off. Use the code Lombard20 at discount. Go ahead and get you some. Like I said, 70 calories, 10 grams of protein. They've got the energy drink, which is 100 calories less than Java Monster. I mean, all their products are just the better for you option out there for all your energy and yummy coffee needs. I used to be a big mocha iced coffee guy in college, and little did I know, it aided in me eventually gaining a bunch of weight. And now, because I make better options because of places like Super Coffee, that has since changed. But moving on, episode 123, got a fantastic guest today. Somebody who I revere greatly. His following on Twitter is super informative, especially when it comes to freight by rail, freight on intercoastal waterways. He's a major intercoastal waterway respecter. He's got a great story. He's played a sport you may or may not have heard of. He's a proud Croatian man, claims the Midwest as well, which, as you know, there's no podcast out there that actually respects the Midwest more than the Lombard Trucking Show. So without any further delay, I want to bring him right up onto the stage. Mr. Kurt Shaffer, how we doing, brother?
Howdy, Mike. Thank you for having me on here.
Absolutely, dude. Glad to have you here. Appreciate you jumping on here. I know you're coming at us from not necessarily the Midwest, but kind of the center of the country. You're in Denver, Colorado, right?
Yes, sir. Although by some people's account, my own included, Denver's absolutely the edge of the Midwest. I will go ahead and just claim the city for us right now.
Really? So Denver, you think is on the line? You think the Denver? So they call. I've always referred to Pittsburgh as the gateway to the Midwest because it truly is. You still get a little bit of the Northeast kind of cityness, but the hospitality of the Midwest and like the general kind of character of the people. So you're considering the Denver the outlet, like the end of the road.
I'm so glad you jumped to the Pittsburgh analogy because that's exactly what I use too. Denver is the Pittsburgh of the West. It's got the Midwest niceness to it. I kid you not, you go to the bars here and basically everybody graduated from a Midwestern college, but oh no, we're not the Midwest, we're the West, or we're the Front Range, we're the mountains. It's like you're the Midwest. Like it's exactly what's going on over here, which
Yeah,
I don't mind it.
the Front Range. Yeah, that sounds like a term somebody from Denver would coin to try to differentiate themselves. But you want to call them Midwest? Okay, up for debate. If you're tuning in live, you comment down below if you think Denver's the Midwest or not. Maybe I'll make that the poll on the episode when I put it on Spotify. But awesome, man. So I appreciate you jumping on. But yeah, what's the Kurt Shaffer story, dude? Walk us up today. Where are you from? How do we get to, let's go line by line on the resume. How'd we get to today?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'll try to be pretty brief with it. My dad was in the U.S. Air Force for my entire childhood, all the way from 0 to 18. He actually retired about 2 weeks after I graduated high school. So, I was born in New Jersey. I've lived in no particular order in South Carolina, Virginia, Alabama, North Dakota. And finally, for college, I shipped off to Ohio, where I spent 8 years. After that, I ended up in Denver. But that's the quick roadmap. For everything else, I uh, I work in freight. I'm a operations manager for a pretty major player in the intermodal space. Gotten into intermodal because mostly, honestly, because of what my dad did. He flew the C-17. Before I was alive, he flew the C-141. So that was always a really big kind of impact on me growing up. When we were in Charleston, we would drive from Charleston Air Force Base all the way down to Mount Pleasant for my sister's high school and my middle school. So crossing over Port Charleston basically every day, you're seeing containers all over the place. That was always really cool to me. Um, I do end up at Ohio State in 2014. College or whatever you do after high school is the first real decision you get to make as an adult, right? So I get there, and my dad gives me two options. He says, "All right, either you're paying for this or you're doing something that's going to make money." And I was like, "Cool." Poli sci doesn't make money, and I'm not really good at English. So went into the Fisher College of Business. Sat down with an advisor there, and they had this really cool little laminated rectangle thing on the desk, and it had the list of majors, or I should say focuses is what Ohio State calls them. Had the list of focuses within business, and then next to them was the after 5 years average salary. And at the top was computer science, and I said I'm not that much of a nerd. And below that was finance, and I said I'm not that kind of guy. And then below that was logistics, and it all just kind of clicked from there, right? So had my dad's influence, had being on the road all the time, because being a military family, you move a lot. You're literally on the road, traveling all the time. And then just finally got to school, and I was like, yeah, that feels like it's a natural fit for me.
Awesome. And where did you say you went to school again?
The Ohio State University.
That's
Somebody out there's gonna
okay.
be pissed off if I don't have the V.
Yeah, I wanted you I wanted you to actually repeat that for the effect of the Ohio State, because I know, yes, we do have some friends of the show who are Michigan fans. I know there's a lot of combat in the
I'm very
Midwest
sorry for that.
when it comes to that football. But awesome. So you decide. So when it came to going to Ohio State, your actual degree was in logistics.
Yeah, so the degree I have, it's a bachelor's of science in business administration with a specialization in logistics. Um, I just say logistics because that's a lot of words that no one cares about. But it was really interesting. I remember I didn't really do anything in logistics for the first 2 years. It was just your general business stuff. And then the last two, a lot of memorable moments with some pretty interesting professors who would talk about anything from, reverse logistics or how you take trash and make money out of it essentially to what are the ways that you can impact the environment through different modes. A lot of that actually kind of pulled me towards transportation even more, as it's always good when you can combine those environmental impact things with saving money. And then I'll never forget, I had one professor, he was ex-army, and I'm blanking on his name, but my minor is in Russian area politics, or poli sci Russian area focus. And I was writing my senior capstone for that minor on the Russian rail network, because of course I was. And I mentioned it to him like very briefly after class one day, and he ended up pulling me into just a ad hoc lunch with him to talk about his experiences dealing with Russians and their logistics networks for like the next hour. It was so freaking cool.
Actually, I want to know what you know about that, because there's a YouTube channel. There's a few of them of Russian truck drivers, and they have older Peterbilts, older American trucks, and these guys are essentially like, they're kind of mechanical wizards, because when you get out to Eastern Russia and you're out on the ice and you're out in the snow and you're out on those long roads, like it's their infrastructure, and like Russia's large, and the continental US is large too. I mean, not as big, but still big in a sense of 3,000 miles coast to coast. But on I-40, granted, yes, that there's a quote truck parking shortage. Like, we know there's not enough parking for trucks, but in places like Russia, there's also literally no truck stop services for like getting repairs, tow services, stuff like that. So these guys have like YouTube channels where they're like on the side of the road fixing stuff. So I want to, yeah, how do, like, I'm assuming Russia must use a lot more train.
So the biggest thing to realize about Russian logistics is kind of twofold. The first one is that Moscow and St. Petersburg, they're not by any means the only place, but politically and economically, they're the only place. And really, at this point, politically and economically, it's just Moscow. St. Petersburg is there, but it's not used that much. Most of the other cities are shrinking, extremely small to begin with, and have very tenuous connectivity to the rest of the world. For example, Norilsk, I believe is the name of the town, is the most northern city in Russia. It has a population of like 150,000 people. There is nothing into it except a freight train. That's it. There's no road access. You have to fly in, I believe. You might be able to train in, but that's it. So a lot of times for that stuff, you don't just run into yeah, it's a far distance and there's nothing out there. You also, when you get to those town centers, you don't have a very interconnected economy. Instead, you have a very self-sustained, self-interested places. So the best example that I can give off the top of my head is Anador, the capital of, I think it's the Chukotka Autonomous Region, basically the most northeastern part of Russia, the part that's right next to Alaska. Capital is Anador, and it's got about 50,000 people, I think, in the entire oblast. Might be a toss region, blanking right now. Um, it's another area where it's like, yeah, they're a part of Russia, right? Well, their only access is once again either an occasional freight train, rail, or air. And what do you think that really does overall for things like resupplying a town with food? Resupplying a town, you can't exactly Amazon in a new computer if your old one breaks. So it's one of the many ways, and I'll keep the topic on free, but it's one of the many ways that just kind of like the political economy of Russia ends up denegating a lot of those smaller and mid-sized towns throughout Russia, and especially Siberia. Um, and then, of course, you have the exact opposite of that, right? You have the mega projects. You have the Trans-Siberian Railway. Love them or hate them, the completion and the running of the Trans-Siberian Railway is probably one of the single most impressive feats any country has ever done in the world of logistics. It is fascinating that they were able to build that thing in the 1800s, that they were just able to push through and get it done. I mean, you're talking about an area of land that's longer than the United States with no population centers at that time really worth anything. And they were able to get it done. They were able to connect it to Vladivostok, which is kind of maybe sometimes even a relevant port to begin with. It's certainly not as big nowadays as anything in Japan or China, but it's there and they can do it. And in some respects, not to get too philosophical about it, but a lot of times when I read about Russian events, I kind of compare it as like a black mirror to the United States, right? Like we have the interstate highway system, we have Kansas City, Denver, major population centers, even the smaller ones, Cheyenne, get out there to Bismarck. We have those quote unquote tiny cities that are completely disconnected of everything, but they're extremely connected compared to what Russia has. And so, yeah, I can only imagine like being an OTR driver in Russia, you've got to be an absolute jack of all trades. You probably have half of a truck sitting in your cab with you in case something breaks.
Yeah, those guys sound like savages. I'll tell you those that railroad that Russia was able to build. Granted, they did it in the 1800s. Just knowing kind of Russia, like a little bit of Russian history, um, and knowing a little bit about how railroads were built in the U.S., I'd imagine that Russian railroads were built with expendable labor to an extent, and like maybe yeah,
Certainly the nice way to put it.
yeah, that's that's the best way to put it. But granted, nonetheless, I mean, the Roman Empire aqueducts also, where the designers might have been genius, the labor, could have been some sort of nation that they had conquered. But a conversation for a different day. So interesting. I don't think anything in logistics was offered where I went to school, but that's the thing. It's becoming more and more popular. I know the University of Tennessee has supply chain programs, both undergrad and grad. I've had on the executive VP from Relay Payments. She got her, her master's degree from Tennessee and supply. So it's becoming a more popular study in the collegiate world. And which is a good thing because when it comes to most colleges, the argument against college is they've been offered these degrees that have been essentially worthless. But that's what's great about this industry is it's so vast. From, like I said, I have a college degree and I wound up driving a truck, but what did that degree still have value? Yeah, because when I underwrote my business, I knew how to do that. I knew how to underwrote, and I knew how to, use Excel and balance sheets, and I knew a little bit about marketing. And so the things I knew that definitely helped. And where I didn't succeed in owning a truck, I think I'm still succeeding now with the direction of where I've gone with the Lombard and the Lombard brand. But all right, so let's like out of college, you get interested, you learn about global supply chains. Where do you go from the Ohio State?
So, there I was sitting in what I can only describe as a modern day tenement in downtown Columbus. I was in a fraternity, shout out to Phi Kappa Tau. And I had no plan, no job, no women, no future, nothing. Day college graduation plus one. And so my college fraternity chef, guy by the name of Danny Vinion, he's down now in Dallas, Texas. He's one of the head chefs for some big uh, healthcare network or hospital network, something or another. So he's doing really well. He comes to me, he says, "Kurt, you're gonna live in my house. You're gonna get your life together. You're gonna deal with it that way." I was like, "What do you mean?" You just kind of made it happen. So there I was, not even a sublease, just Venmoing the dude like $350 a month for rent. I got my first ever job out of college, and I was an anti-money laundering investigator for U.S. Bank. I lasted a month and I got fired. I hated that job so much. That was, if anything, that was the job I realized I cannot be the kind of office minion that just does spreadsheets all day. It is not my strength. I'm not doing that. So anti-money laundering investigating, not the world for me. I got another gig at a place at the time it was called Facility Source. Since then, they've been purchased by CBRE, and it was essentially to relate it to logistics. It was doing dispatch for plumbers and technicians on company facilities. So, company facility, we'll say Target in West Jefferson, and I mean like the Target, not like the distribution center Target. Target in West Jefferson, Ohio, toilet blows up. They call us. We find the plumber to literally go out there and replace it. So that was weird. I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do, but it paid the bills and it was something I could actually do. I like to think I'm good with people, so that's probably why I succeeded at that. But so once I got that job, I gave myself 6 months and I said, "All right, you have a degree in logistics. You love logistics. You talk about it all the time. You annoy the hell out of your friends with it. Friends don't even know what the hell logistics means. Figure it out." So 6 months from then, um, I I think it was actually 6 months to the day. I accepted a job offer at my current company, Fortune 300. Like I said, big intermodal brand. You can guess what it is, I'm sure, but been there ever since. I was down in Columbus doing fleet managing for a minute, just as the frontline manager for my fleet. Moved up to Toledo as a logistics planner role for the Toledo operation. Now, during that time, it was really cool because the CSX was actually adding in truck traffic. They added a truck gate to their to their North Baltimore facility with an agreement with the BNSF to go straight from North Baltimore, Ohio, which is south of Findlay, south or north, right around Findlay, go straight to Los Angeles. So you could bypass Chicago, you could bypass KC. You don't have to do any of that interchange stuff, just straight, literal rural Ohio. Bang, congratulations, you're on the West Coast. So that blew the fleet up really quickly. And that was also around the time that COVID bump was happening for us. COVID had hit right probably in the middle of my tenure as a fleet manager. But so I ended up going up to Toledo mid-COVID. Once I was in Toledo, that fleet started exploding. You had the COVID bump of freight, so even more exploding. We went from, I want to say, around mid 30s driver count to over 80 within the span of about a year. That was a just tremendous amount of growth that came not out of nowhere, but definitely, caused some challenges for how to manage that much, manage those expectations for the drivers. Then after that, the big boss of my region asked me to be the first ever weekend logistics planner for all of Ohio. So for about, I think it was 11 months total, I was sitting there back in Columbus, Ohio, planning the fleet. I think it totaled somewhere in the mid 100s of driver count, maybe lower mid 100s, um, between Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Toledo, where all the major rail hubs are. And then finally, our spot opened up for a promotion to get me out to Denver. And I said, wow, I can stay in Columbus, Ohio and work weekends, or I can go to Denver, Colorado, and all I have to do is have a really nice conversation. Turns out, had a nice enough conversation. They chose me on the interview, and here I am.
Dude, that's awesome. So a shot at a little promotion there. So when it comes to, is that your current title right now? You're still a fleet manager.
No, so I am currently a operations manager. So I do oversee the entire fleet. My fleet size sits between 30 and 40 or so at any given time, and we run generally as far north as southern Wyoming to as far south as southern Colorado.
Ah, okay. That's a big region. Now I kind of want to break that down only because I don't think I've ever had a a fleet manager or a dispatcher on the show yet. So I kind of want to run that down. Number one, I know how busy it was in Ohio because at the end of 2020, I was pulling Walmarts out of a DC, Walmart DC in Seymour, Indiana. And I know that, I mean, that's how busy. And Walmart is obviously have been moving away from uh, contracting motor carriers in general. For a good reason. I mean, Walmart wouldn't want to do that anyways. They've, I think how their supply chain works is very robust. But nonetheless, in 2020, Walmart was in need of trailers to move, whether go from DC to customer to store, back to customer, back to DC, etc. So when I was driving for Pam, I pulled those trailers and yeah, I was all over. I've probably been to every Walmart, Sam's Club in Ohio, pulling out of Washington Courthouse, like all those places. So I know how busy it was, but like the job of a fleet manager. So like when you were in Ohio, what does that day to day look like? So to speak, like what was a typical day?
So a fleet manager, it is designed to be an entry level management role, and I'll say my company puts a lot of emphasis on the difference, and I think because we're asset owning and because when you're asset owning and have, truck drivers as your employees, it's important to make the distinction. Fleet managers are not dispatchers. A fleet manager's role is to be I don't like the term boss, I like manager. To be the manager of the driver. So you need to be, aware of what's going on in their life as far as it, pertains to what they want to tell you. You need to be willing and able to help them out. Now, our fleet managers, they've got a pretty set window when they're in the office. When you get to my level of operations manager, your phone needs to basically always be on, you always be on. Um, but really, the job of the fleet manager is to assist the driver in getting their job done. For everyone out there listening who is an owner operator or anything like that, it's your dispatcher. If your dispatcher had a little bit more say, I'd say, in where you're going. But so driver shows up to well, to use the big companies because everyone goes there. Driver shows up to Walmart. Hey, boss, I got this delivery. They're asking for, this packet of paper and it's not the back of the trailers. What's up? It's now your job to figure that out. Hey, I've got my kid's recital is tomorrow. I'm going to need PTO. I'm sorry I didn't know about that. You're the person that now makes it happen. Hey, I've got, a safety thing going on. Your first call is to the safety line. Your second call is to your fleet manager. Your fleet manager is going to obviously make sure you call it safety, but then after that, they're going to make sure you're okay. Get you whatever you need to get out of that situation, do it safely, make sure everything's recorded and whatnot else there. The fleet manager's job also got a little in the payroll, and that's kind of the part that they really emphasize is like that you are, the manager of it. Because the ops manager, they have a busy life. Everyone has a busy life in the supply chain. There's not really a sit back and relax job. But so the fleet manager, it's there to be kind of a training role to see whether or not you could kick it in a higher role, and it teaches you the very important, more important than anything, the human element of being a manager. When you get to logistics planner, which at least as far as my career went, that was what I did afterwards. When you get to logistics planner, your focus is more of the business side. It's more of the, what are the KPIs I'm expected to hit? How am I going to hit that? What's my staffing look like? What's my on-time service percentage? What are the customers we're lacking on? Why are we lacking on them? How are we going to solve that issue? That's logistics planner and ops manager stuff. The fleet manager is very much, hey, I don't have anyone named Bob. I don't think I've had a Bob in a while. What's Bob up to? How's Bob doing? Is he where he wants to be financially? Is he where he wants to be work-life balance? Does he have the shift that he wants? What can we do to get him there? What can we do to keep him happy, keep him productive, and keep him more than anything safe? Right. So the fleet manager, I would be amiss if I didn't mention it. It's definitely something that I carry close to my heart. The fleet manager is the kind of starting point for most of the culture of your office as far as the drivers see. And so when it comes to things like safety culture, which you should, as any operation, value above anything, the fleet manager sets that tone. Now, the OM is going to set it to the fleet manager, but your fleet manager, that's your job. You need every driver on your fleet to know that you're not going to ask them to do anything insane or dangerous. When they tell you they're not feeling safe, or when they tell you they're not feeling that they can complete the job safe, you are going to make the right call, which is always going to be telling them not to do it, and to make sure that the drivers know that you have their back. And that's a lot of words. And the thing is it's a pretty multi-touch job. It's not as simple as just sit there and click a button all day. Like I said, I can't do Excel jobs, but that's kind of in a mouthful what a fleet manager is.
No, I like that. It's the yeah. I like how you mentioned it's the human element. It's the yeah. It's more because when a fleet manager is to me sometimes is being a driver is like a loaded term because I've heard people refer to themselves as fleet managers, but really they're just giving me my next load, and it's just like so to me that's a dispatcher. But it's not one size fits all logo. Clearly, a fleet manager is also actually a legitimate manager doing what I currently do now, which as head coach, I am a manager of people and I do their schedule and check in on them and evaluate them and make sure that they got their certs and all this other stuff. And you kind of got to do the same thing. When you mentioned that there's no laid back jobs in logistics or supply chain, I wanted to sneak in and be like, yeah, the most laid back job is freight broker. They've got it the easiest out there, and they know it. If they're listening, they
They've
know
got
it.
it the easiest.
They got the easiest job because you just mentioned other stuff. You mentioned KPIs and stuff like that. Brokers, we know what you're doing. You're smiling and dialing, guys. Don't act like you got the highest
Broker
check.
KPI is Yeah, broker KPI is how many caviars can I order on the company dime this year? I mean, come on, dude, that's not a real job. What else
Yeah,
is a easy laid back job? Freight thought leader.
yeah.
I'd like to
Freight
see someone
thought
put that
leader.
on their LinkedIn. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
somebody
Like,
out
what are
there.
you leading, dude? Come on, get out of here.
Yeah, somebody out there on LinkedIn has that in their bio. Freight thought. Yeah, global thought leader.
That
But
that that sounds like a Reed shit post.
it is a Reed-esque post. But so fleet manager, number one, your just your overall tone and description of being fleet manager shows your passion for the job. It shows you've got skin in the game, which I myself and I think anybody listening can appreciate. Which clearly earned you this because I'm sure fleet managers. Some people probably have that job and probably stay there. Maybe they love it. I don't really know. It depends. Everybody's different, but clearly your ethic and your success as fleet manager got you this promotion in Denver. You interviewed for it, you got it. Now what's different now? I mean, you kind of briefly mentioned it. Now you do have you have you have other metrics that you're going off of now. You're kind of less focused on driver, you're not as driver focused because you're not talking with them every day. What does an operations manager do kind of at your level now? And once again, you're still working with like as a fleet manager, you're dealing with guys who are hauling intermodal and you're still dealing with the same, you're not dealing with any sort of any like dry van, like OTR, like regular, like that type of freight. You've strictly been kind of on the intermodal side of things, like guys hauling containers.
Yeah, if it's not on rail, I bail. It's not my job. So The operations manager, I don't want to call it a super fleet manager job, although sometimes that is what it feels like. My job is a little bit more bird in the sky, although it still requires most of, if not all of the skills I still had back then. So the biggest job of the OM, especially in my position where I have a fleet manager office below me, I would say a dispatch office, but that kind of defeats what I was saying earlier. My primary job is to ensure that my fleet managers are comfortable, competent, and ready to go to do what I did. Um, if I had one, I don't currently, it would be to do the same with the logistics planner. So instead of that, I cover most of the planning operations, tag team that sometimes with my fleet managers, but it's usually on me nowadays. And it really is to instill the culture in the office more than anything. Like I'll always tell the drivers, I will make you the money you want to make to the best of my ability. All this is the best of my ability, right? Can't make nobody a millionaire. I will get you the work-life balance that you're looking for to the best of my ability. I will do what I can to get you all of the excess fun things, not frivolous, but the other things. The job of the OM more than anything is to make sure that everybody gets home safe. Now I'm not a safety man, but frankly put, everyone in management is the safety man, and if you're not, get out of management. Um, but so that's something I close pretty close to my heart. I've always said I'm not going to be the person that has a major accident happen on my watch. It's just I don't ever want to be in that situation. I've seen it happen. Other operations managers have had it happen to them throughout the careers. I've been looking up at them and watching what they're doing. Um, really bad accidents of various type have happened on fleets that I've been on that I wasn't the ops manager for, and that's always kind of like the ultimate thing, right? Is under no circumstance do you shy away from or miss on safety. But then obviously that only goes so far because the drivers aren't in front of your face all the time, and you can only constantly tell them about safety so much before it's like, okay, Kurt, we get the point. What else do you do? So the rest of it is covering the KPIs I was talking about earlier for the most part. So recently, intermodal has seen a pretty decent amount of freight come through. And right now, one of the struggles that my individual operation is facing is that we don't have the staffing. So I'm doing things daily, like obviously we're hiring. Luckily, my company handles most of the pre showing up to work hiring. They handle that over at headquarters. I make sure that once the trainees are here, they have a nice warm welcome from me. They meet the two fleet managers I've got. I make sure the trainers are ready to go, happy, healthy, and want to be training. I send them out there, and I make sure that job's done. Does that job task save me a whole week? No, but few hours on a Monday, one or two 15-minute spiels checking in throughout the week. Then all of a sudden, I've got that guy trained. Okay. He needs his schedule. He needs his freight breakdown. He needs to know what he's going to be doing. And frankly put, if you ever get a new hire who gets a little skittish or doesn't know what he's doing, you kind of need to talk him back from the moving on ledge, right? Say, hey man, look, I know you had a really bad night last night because we do have 24/7 ops. So here, you have my phone number. It's not just a number in case of absolute emergency. Tell you what, for the next few weeks, so you get comfortable, you call me directly. I don't care if I'm home. I don't care if I'm, out at a concert or whatever. You call me. I'll text you back as soon as I can, and I'll make sure that during your shift, I'm going to be available for you. It's doing that things. It's going above and beyond. Making sure that the safety trainings are done is a big part. I'm not the only person in my company, thankfully, that cares the way I do about safety. We have a very intricate network of making sure that everyone is aware and knowledgeable about the truck. And then also doing event reviews with drivers. Whatever I need to take off the plate of my office, make sure that those guys are getting their jobs done. That falls to me. Ultimately, the difference is that I would say is the fleet manager's job is your shift and you go home, whereas the operation manager's job is ownership of the operation. So really everything, even down to the equipment, ordering the uniforms, that kind of stuff, all of it falls to me.
Awesome. Yeah. So it's just that step above kind of on the management chain. So but you said, so right there, you claiming that you have a shortage of drivers?
No. Um, I, as Kurt Schaefer, um, am a firm believer in a capitalist system that incentivizes and allows a open and free labor market. Now, with my experience as an operations manager, I can tell you some interesting tidbits to that. Uh, one man's perfect driver is another man's burnout. Not every fleet's the same. You've driven the truck. I'm sure if you haven't done it yourself, you've talked to different guys. Someone that wants to be running OTR routes all the time, someone that wants to be living that real, super trucker life. They're not going to like my fleet. My fleet is. I've always said the ideal for an intermodal local freight or fleet, which is what I run, is you've got office job hours and truck driver expectations. You're out there, you're a truck driver, but you're going home every day. You can have a family, you can have your free time, you can do all that stuff. And I want my guys to enjoy that stuff. But that's not going to cut it for the guy who wants to be, the American steel cowboy driving across the country all the time. So a lot of times what I've seen with the mismatch isn't necessarily, oh, we can't get people in the door. It's they weren't aware what they actually were going for, or were they not aware of what they're doing. Also, frankly put, whenever freight's booming, you shouldn't have the exact size of a driver count that you need. Imagine if freight was booming and you had the perfect number of drivers you needed to cover it. That means either A, you're not growing fast enough, or B, you have been way overstaffed for a very long time. And as much as, I don't fire people or nothing like that, at least I haven't had to fire anyone for an insane reason like a freight downturn, there's going to be turnover. Guys will retire. Guys will move on. Guys will go do something else, leave the cab entirely, and that's fine. Um, but no, in terms of the shortage to the idea that we can't get people, I'm not. It's an open market, right? I mean, I'm not going to say trucking is nothing, but like realistically, if you put your mind to it, you can become a truck driver a lot easier than you can say a doctor, right? And so in terms of that, I don't ever believe in that. I don't ever believe in that narrative.
No, that's it. It's good though that you're able to find guys, and you are right when it comes to that of being a driver. Like because there are local jobs in my area that I've considered, and I gave a presentation to Hayes County bus drivers, and I honestly wouldn't mind driving a school bus. It's something I can see myself doing, but with how my current family situation is set up, it's just I also genuinely enjoy what I'm doing now, and I think it's helping prop up the direction of where I'm going, especially athletically, and what I'm doing with charity and other things, which I'll talk more about in other episodes because there's so much exciting things going on, and I'm eager to keep manifesting on some of that. But yeah, there's a lot of guys out there, and I've talked to these drivers who, they've been OTR for a while, and then they'll get a local job, and they hate it, and they wanted to be home more, quote wanted, whether they had a family or not, but they end up getting into local work, and it has nothing to do with the hours, so to speak, but it just, yeah, there is something very alluring. I mean, I get a yearning and an itch in my gut often, and I've talked with Gord McGill, friend of the show, about this too, because I mean he's been a local guy, but like he still has said, and I don't think the door is ever shut on me going back over the road at any given time. But it's just, yeah, there is something very alluring to that lifestyle. And when it gets in your veins, it's very hard to get out or want to or grow out of. And like, I don't know if I've made the comparison on the show before, but guys in the military, especially officers, will get that same thing. You see it in the show Band of Brothers a little bit. You see it with Captain Winters when he gets promoted and he's not in charge of Easy Company anymore. And it's like it's almost that same feeling. Like when you move up, when you're out of the suck, so to speak, there is this feeling of like I don't know. It's hard to like put into words. Like when you like because being OTR, you feel like you're a part of it. You're a part of the machine. You're a part of like who's doing it, who's out there. Yeah, steel cowboy, however you want to like that reference. And when you go locally, like you feel like you've kind of like you're trapped in this cage. I don't know. It's hard to put a word on it, so to speak. But there's other guys. I've talked to guys who've only been local, and even now, like I coach a couple of truck drivers at Orange Theory, and they're like, "Oh, dude!" Like when I tell them I drove, they're like, "Oh, dude, I would never do." He's like, they have their chirps. Oh, you're working, you were working for pennies out there, and so and stuff like that. But they're like, I would never do like that lifestyle. They're like, dude, not worth it. Never was worth it to me. Never enticing. But it's just people are different all along the seams of the industry. But when it comes to your position, I'd say, I mean, you've probably seen a lot of stuff go on. I always like asking this. What's one of the biggest obstacles you think you've overcome? Like what was like an oh shit moment where, it hit the fan and you had to really like rack your brain, use your resources and like solve like a major problem that like had a positive net outcome.
I mean,
Sure, there's more than
I
one.
feel like on one hand, yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like on one hand, that's every week. On the other hand, I don't want to give a lame example. I'd say honestly, I was mentioned earlier when I was in Toledo as the load planner, logistics planner. I don't know. We did grow basically 2x over the course of a year, which, as you know, for trucking, this ain't tech. 2x in a year is an absurd growth, right? That's we were throwing everything at the fan just to try to get guys in seats. And I can't really take that much credit. That's kind of the good and kind of the bad of working for a larger, more established company is that there's always more than one hand in the soup, so to speak. But so I can never say there was any one thing where I came through and saved the day or anything like that. But a lot of times, what it is it's collaboration with your team. So we had to sit down and be like, all right, look, we're adding double. We're literally doubling the fleet. What are the things we need to do? And then, just start reporting up the ladder. I've been very lucky throughout my entire career that the bosses, the big bosses I've always had, they've always been listening to us. They've always been very receptive. When we say, hey, the sky's turning purple tomorrow, they're like, no, it's not. And I'm like, yeah, here, there's the proof the sky's turning purple tomorrow. They're like, oh, okay, well, maybe it will. So like right now, for example, I was saying how intermodal is seeing a bump for a variety of reasons. I'm sure Craig Fuller's a lot more knowledgeable on why than I am necessarily, but we're going through this bump. Well, I, at the beginning of the year, was certainly not expecting as big of a bump as we've been getting. So a lot of my conversations now are with my boss, with the big boss, whatnot, service team about, what are we seeing here? Obviously, we want to hit everything. The goal is always 100%, right? Nothing less than 100% is ever an acceptable goal. So, what do we need to do to start even getting close to that again? Turn on the pipeline. Are we going to start calling carriers? And those are things that we've started to do. So, in the respect of right now, what's going on, we're moving the needle back towards where it should be. In the respect of what was going on back in 21, I mean, we fixed it. We certainly got there. We probably got there a little later than we were expecting to, but once we were in place, the aha or the beauty of the moment was, hey, we did it. We did double the size of this fleet. We got the guys in seats. We had if I'm not mistaken, we still had a very stellar safety record through all of that. We maintained 98+% service, so we got all of our KPIs met. But honestly, to go back to something you were saying earlier, kind of like the feeling of belonging, or when military guys leave like command or military, when you still have that itch. It's obviously nothing near the military, but I do feel like one of the things that's always kept me going is I use the term maestro, is I love it, right? You show up every day, and I don't get one big thing. I'm not a project manager. I don't have one titanic issue in front of me that I got to solve. Instead, there's always 1,000 things. 500 of them are going wrong. You have to fix them, make it happen. I love that. I love the idea of not being left on my own, but of you are now responsible for fixing the issue, get it done. Um, And that's just it's definitely an emotion that's kept me going, especially through, not only did we have the 21 boom, but then it was followed up with the 22, 23 bust, right? And that was terrible time for everyone in the industry. And just getting through that and being able to tamper emotions as much as I've been able to, I think is probably the closest thing I have to a superpower. Not my own. I get very livid. I get very lively. Oftentimes in situations I probably shouldn't, but I've always been able on any fleet I've been a part of to talk honestly with the drivers, and I think that that's helped me more than anything.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. What you're doing really, I mean, you're setting up a foundation. You're still a younger cat. Not to say you're immature by any stretch of the means, because I I wish I had some of the brains that you currently have now. When I was your age, I might be a little bit further along in things I'm doing, but you're stacking the mental fortitude, I think, in this role that is that'll pay dividends a decade from now, when there's people who either are in a similar role that were put there, with, maybe ahead of the game, or before they had, quote, deserved it, or earned it. Sometimes the wrong people get into the right jobs, so to speak. And I think, like, when it comes to what I think a young person getting into, like, this industry, I mean, I think the younger the better. Like, if people can jump into those roles, I mean, it's the same thing with drivers. Like, a guy who's a driver, if they come in 21 and they do it, as opposed to somebody who comes in at 35 and has worked like another job, it might not jive. But yeah, you're stacking, like, mental toughness and, like, the ability to problem solve multiple different things that will pay often dividends in years to come. It's already paying off now. I did get you. You were mentioned. We mentioned the boom and bust. You brought up how intermodal saw a hop. I mentioned at the top of the show, and we were talking beforehand. We do love intercoastal waterway respecting here, and I want to know what intel you've got
Yes.
about the Mississippi River. And what do we have to come, because I don't think that it's such a part of this. I think, and I have friends from Connecticut who listen to this who don't know anything about transportation. And I don't think people realize, like, how powerful the Mississippi River, number one, is, but how underutilized, I think, uh, inland waterways are for freight and just everything. What's the inside baseball on intercoastal waterways? What do the people need to know?
All right. If you're listening at home, you need to repeat this one. You might have to scroll back a little bit. Dwight D. Eisenhower creates the interstate highway system. That is a completely free to the user at the absolute moment, and to the business when they're doing trucking, way of transporting anything to anywhere in the United States. Overnight, trucking becomes a mega business on the scale that it simply couldn't be without a highway system. Also, overnight, it becomes a system where the users don't have to pay for the actual transit infrastructure. The federal government subsidizes it. Yeah, sure, the taxes do, but let's be honest, we have $35 trillion in debt. You think the taxes have been paying off the highways that long? No. So at that point, the explosion in trucking is immense. And that's awesome, right? We want more commerce to be happening. But now we fast forwarded what has been 70, 75 years, something like that, since the internet and since the interstate's been built. Okay, we've built out. Kansas City is the size that it is now. Chicago is like a 4, 7, 8 million person city. Dallas, Texas is sitting on 6 million. We've got more people around the country, but they're all kind of still in the same nodes, right? They're all kind of in the same places. Well, as a truck driver, and as frankly put, anyone who's lived anywhere near a major population center knows, traffic sucks. And it really sucks when it decreases the amount of freight you can move. So we are now in the middle of seeing really what I think of as a turning point, a zeitgeist, where trucking used to be the go-to end all only answer. But now, because of how congested most major American cities are, it is once again economically feasible for not just shippers, but the people who build and run the infrastructure to set up things like more dense or more well functioning rail systems. And as I've been writing about now for about 2 year and a half, something like that, Uh, inland waterway system for intermodal freight, containerized inland freight. So this is something that only right now exists in the context of a barge. A barge can fit between 200 to 340 foot or sorry, 20 foot or TEUs on it. Those are the small boxes. America runs 53s, but frankly put, it's all kind of nominal at that point when you're talking about the scale of changing the entire logistics network. So a barge can fit max 300. Well, a train can also fit max about 300. So even though a barge is cheaper, it's moving at 5 miles an hour down the Mississippi River versus the train moving at between 25 and 45. Your speed metrics, your volume metrics are either tied or losing. Your cost metrics would have to be absurd for you to make it up, and it's just not there. Additionally, all of the actual infrastructure for you to go to the major places. Now, remember, on the Mississippi River, for the same size vessel, you can get to Chicago, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Louisville. You can get to St. Paul. You can get to Kansas City. You can get to Memphis, St. Louis, and of course, NOLA down there in Louisiana. Those are most of them. I might be skipping a few. All of those major population centers, not a single designated intermodal crane. That increases your costs because now if you have a barge and you want to barge I don't know, a container full of chairs like the ones I'm sitting in, you want to barge that from Chicago, the intermodal network of the country. You want to barge that down to New Orleans, buddy. It's not that cheap. It's going to take you forever, and frankly put, you're not really gaining anything on it. So there's this company out in Miami that looked at that issue and said, okay, so we've got a few bigger points that feed into the issue of why there's no containerized freight or why there's very low volume containerized freight. Firstly, a barge is not a powered vehicle, so you don't have a designated powered vehicle. There are no shipping ships. There's no container ships on the Mississippi. Secondly, there's no infrastructure for container ships or barges or anything on the Mississippi's major nodes where intermodal freight, which is generally consumer goods or partially finished goods that need to go to a manufacturing site, those don't exist. So this company, American Patriot Holdings, the subsidiary is American Patriot Container Transport. They patented the first ever patent for a Mississippi River capable container vessel. It moves about the same speed of a train. And instead of 300 boxes, it's got two variants. One's called the cruiser, I believe, or the liner, excuse me. And the second one's called the hybrid. The liner, which is for the main route, which can go all the way from NOLA up to probably right now just St. Louis, although it might be able to get to Chicago, how it ends up looking up if it does. It can fit, if I'm not mistaken, 2750 TEU. That's 10 times more boxes minimum that it can fit versus a train and versus a barge. Now, the smaller one, the liner, that's going to be designed to be able to go to your St. Paul's and your Pittsburghs. Yes, Pittsburgh, you can go all the way to Pittsburgh. Those can fit, I think it was 1750. Those I know the 1750 is right. I'm not sure if the liners was, it might be a little less. But point is, in both of those situations, you are talking about mega ships compared to what currently exists. Mega ships. Now, the other thing is the infrastructure aspect, right? You can build the ship, but then your ship shows up to Kansas City and it's just sitting there with a bunch of containers on it. You're saying, well, what do I do now? The city of KC is investing, I believe right now they've earmarked $26 million into a project to build what will eventually be a $500 million designated intermodal container port. And if I'm not mistaken, that one's name is the Missouri River Terminal, or the MRT. That is being built. It is a thing they are currently doing. They are currently designing it. They are currently buying the land rights to wipe that out and to build that port. So you'll have KC done. Over there in St. Louis, they are building a port just south of St. Louis I've only ever read the word and tried to say it a few times. Herculaneum, I believe, or Herculaneum, something like that. Jefferson County or Jefferson Township. They've already broken ground on it. I'm not sure the price estimates on that one, but it's good. It's going to be big. And once again, is a designated intermodal container port on the Mississippi River. And we're not talking about the Delta. which we'll talk about in a second. We're talking about actually up into the Mississippi River. Speaking of the Delta, um, Louisiana has, last I checked, 2 projects right now. One is the Louisiana International Terminal, or the LIT. Just like KC, it's going to be a $500 million project. They're already kind of breaking ground on it. And the other one, I believe these are 2 separate ones. From every indication I can tell, is going to be built in Plaquemine Parish, so a little bit closer to the ocean than the LIT, which would have been up the river, actually past New Orleans itself. Plaquemine is either scheduled or still. I know they're in the approval process to build another designated intermodal terminal, with the idea being essentially that Plaquemine would be the breakdown point, and the LIT would be the loading point onto the bigger ships. At least that's kind of the way I see it. They may just be rivals. They may end up being rivals. But the other interesting note, although it's not quite inland waterways, the LIT is going to be linked to a rail that goes directly to Dallas. So, multimodal means all modes, right? So that's kind of the overview. That's both a combination of what it could be. I mean, we're talking about something that could potentially get a boat all the way from Louisiana to Chicago and you never have to off dock. But what does that mean? Why should anyone care, right? I don't have exact numbers in front of me. I did read this in a report. The cost savings right this very moment to ship a container from LA, Long Beach to Louisiana, New Orleans. The cost savings to do it over water, even though you have to go all the way down to the Panama Canal, across the Panama Canal, and up, compared to just railing it, it's half the price. Now apply that to basically anything moving between what amounts to, I think, about a third of the American population, as far north as Chicago and Minneapolis, and as far south as the Deep South. And that's what the inland waterways can really look like if you're talking about intermodal freight.
Dude, I couldn't go because we're running on time, but I couldn't have thought up a better place to wrap it up because like I'm not gonna lie, and it's because I love how fired up you are about it because it kind of gets my mouth watering because like I love this stuff. Like and people should be hyped on it. Like that is electric stuff right there. The idea of being able to do that. And why should the regular consumer pay attention? Not even just the cost savings, but the idea of reduced traffic, like less vehicles on the road. All right, we're gonna set some time. I want a part 2 with you back on here, and we're gonna keep talking about this waterway stuff. I would love to because I know you got a Substack out there. Which, by the way, where can people find your Substack and follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter is going to be the easiest one for you. That's going to be at Kurt W. Shaffer, KurtWShaffer. The Substack is Kurt on Fire, although if I'm not mistaken, it is in fact also just Kurt W. Shaffer at Substack. But the link is there on my Twitter too, in case you can't find it that way.
Perfection. And I'll put that in the show notes. Dude, I want to thank you for coming on, hang out for a few seconds. I'm going to walk this out and appreciate you again, man. You got me all fired up.
Absolutely, any day.
Yes, sir. Take care. Well, guys, you heard it. Once again, bet on the Midwest. You heard him. We got ports and bet on Kansas City. Super Bowl champions. Bet on that city. Bet on St. Louis, home of First Form, by the way. Fun fact. Look at this is big stuff going on. And this is a young cat out there who got his fingers right into the industry. And just when you see that type of passion come out in a conversation, it does. What a way to prime me up for the week. It's Sunday at time of recording. And it's just another reason why I'll never, like, my heart and soul is into everything that I'm doing and that everybody's helping me doing out here. I want to thank you guys once again for coming out, listening, especially the live viewers out there. To walk this out once again, we're hammered down all the way to Waco. Again, we're really trying to blow this up with donations to Wreaths Across America. If you can, once again, that link, www.wreathsacrossAmerica.org/Lombard. We're trying to get this thing huge. It's an organization that deserves a lot of money. This is a driver health epidemic we have going on that the consumer needs to know about just as much as they need to know about the riverboats to come out there from that new patent in Miami. But with that, guys, that'll do it for episode 123. With that, we're going back to the bench.